I didn't think I was, Anders. The woman finished her glass of wine with a smile of deep triumph, a celebratory drink of sorts, for having deciphered the mystery that was Anders Greylove. "Now, Monica," XXV stated, having finally addressed the woman by her forename, "why don't we begin the exchange of information that we had discussed over the phone?" He then inquired, having shifted his tone to the one of ardent professional yet again. The two had gone on to discuss the above-mentioned while finally beginning to partake in the cold, yet still fancy dishes served to them prior. Monica Simmons, whilst young, had been able to acquire an impressive amount of information regarding the atmosphere of criminality inside the city of Los Angeles. One after the other, she would relay bits of info to Anders, who in turn would analyse the information received immediately after, and would progress to dismiss it as irrelevant, since it did not quite relate to the vision that his younger brother Exterfamth had established as the main priority. However, with the woman's informative cache being one of great abundance, eventually a lead deemed most significant by XXV would in fact manifest. "Well," stated Monica, feeling somewhat defeated as the numerous suggestions the woman had provided were all quite considerably dismissed. "There is this one man whom I knew from our high school days together. I used to date him, actually. Hopefully that isn't a problem, you know," the journalist said, producing a chuckle crafted out of irresolution. "Why would that be a problem, Monica?" Anders posited a question, finding himself residing in mild confusion by the remark made by the journalist. "Well, no, past boyfriends and all of that, you know."
Monica swiftly derailed that train of awkward discourse.
"Anyway, he got involved with a local gang, and honestly, he is much too bright to be doing something like that. He and I keep contact despite not being together and what not, and he tells me certain things regarding the gang operation." The woman took a moment to quickly smile at Anders. "I know he probably shouldn't disclose that information to me, but we are still very good friends. We are only friends, by the way, Anders." Simmons had administered the serum of preemptive reassurance, having clearly displayed heavy interest in the man positioned directly across from her. "At any rate, he did just recently tell me about a deal that is supposed to be happening, a trade deal between two gangs. He said that he felt a little nervous about it, even since he was assigned to oversee it." The woman's tone was no longer filled with the excitement she had exhibited before, but instead with the slightest hints of guilt as she divulged this rather personal information about her dear friend. Anders Greylove noticed the change in Monica's disposition and progressed to attempt to cure it. "Very well done, Monica." XXV was entirely sincere when congratulating the journalist. "This is exactly the type of info that is deemed most desirable." Anders then drew a warm smile to further the process of alleviation for the woman. "Now, there is only one more question that I have to ask you, Monica." A slight pause it was, as the Artifinoid stared at the reporter keenly. "Just what is this man's name?" Monica followed suit and took a moment to herself as well before finally responding with, "Chapter 5, 3. Bentley Johnson, an abandoned industrial section of the downtown LA. This was, with congruous scenery populating it. Factories, depots, storage facilities were just some of the notable pieces of this puzzle. However, they were hardly the main pieces, as this honour befell on a certain young male while he strode towards just one of those previously mentioned buildings. The man was clad in blue jeans, blue shirt, and a blue durag to top it all off. This was not all, however, as he neared the building with a great sense of purpose. He was carrying a duffel bag with him. One might just wonder what was inside that very bag. The man finished his travels and now found himself standing right in front of the stairs to a certain factory building. He looked hesitant to progress further. However, he also had very little choice in the matter, and this was very much apparent, judging by his facial expression. The young and reluctant male began to ascend the steps at once. "About fucking time," said a harsh and very unwelcoming voice once the newcomer entered the building fully. "You are late, motherfucker," the same voice added while retaining the same tone. "The hell you talking about?" responded the recently arrived male wrapped in blue. "I am right on time," he concluded with no aggression amidst his words. "Oh, yeah?" the man with the harsh voice stated as he began to rise to his feet. Whilst this was occurring, the other individual who occupied the building, and who was positioned directly adjacent to the harsh-voiced man, could be seen forming a mocking smile as he stared down the young one with the duffel bag. "I say that you are late, little nigger." The man's voice was no longer just harsh, but much more threatening as well. "So why don't you apologize?" the aggressor concluded, with the other occupant of the building laughing out loud at this request and the same mocking tone still present. "I ain't apologizing for shit, man." The young male with the duffel bag matched the pugnacity of his much larger counterpart. "Is that right?" The considerably bigger instigator quickly burst out with the aggression lessened, however, not completely gone. He then began to near the new arrival at a methodical pace. Eventually, the bigger male would position himself right in front of the smaller, duffel bag-carrying male's face before continuing to speak. "I say again, apologize," he concluded in a deep and baleful tone. The small and troubled, duffel bag-carrying man did not have any other options offered to him, so he reluctantly forfeited. "I am sorry, man. I will be on time next time," he said, sounding defeated while clearly annoyed. The other two bag-less males started to laugh immediately after the apology was produced. Soon after the laughter was done, however, the bullish behemoth began speaking once again. "You a little bitch-ass nigger," said the bigger male while lightly pushing the duffel bag man. The two started to laugh again briefly after the remark. Whilst this was going, the young indigo-cloaked male started to get ready to exit the building in hopes of waiting outside, so that he can escape this unanticipated cannonade of derision. "I will wait for you two outside," he announced while nearly out of the door. The other two remained affected by the spell of laughter, while acknowledging the duffel bag boy's remark. While descending the steps, the embittered youngster muttered to himself the whole way down as he boiled inside a pot of irritation. "Yo, some dumbass niggers," he stated to himself while greatly frustrated. "Still acting like this is high school or some shit." He continued to vocalize while descending the stairs of vexation. He then finally made it to the ground and proceeded to stay there, patiently waiting. What was he waiting on? One might just ask. Inside the duffel bag was a large sum of money. This was intended to be a payment for drugs, as there was a trade deal arranged, nearing its start on this particular day. The two men upstairs were waiting on the call from the higher-up to confirm the meeting. Once this call was received, the three would travel to the previously agreed-on location where the trade would be officialized. This was the plan, at least, but some plans go off rails, as so many surely know by now. "You sure this is the right location, XXV?" Exeand inquired of his older brother, while slightly puzzled by the scenery the two found themselves enveloped by shortly after their arrival. "With all certainty, XVII." A concise response Anders did produce. "We should start making our move now. We needn't waste time." XXV concluded his instructions as exigency took command. "All right," stated Exposecond as the two brothers began to egress the vehicle. "What was the gang's name again?" "The Crippled?" Miccolo asked while reaching inside his pocket for a cigarette while completely oblivious and unprepared. The Crips, Extanth. The name of the gang is Crips. XXV instructed his brother. It is a gang that was started in this exact city in 1969 by two men by the names of... The scholarly creation was interrupted amidst his presentation. Remember what we talked about, XXV? Dextheand asked his brother in an effort to quell his potentially long-winded response. About the history lessons and what not. Miccolo continued the line of questioning while the two were in motion and nearing the intended location. Yes, I do recall the conversation we had concerning that matter. XXV responded with swiftness. However, we must put that very matter to the side, as there is one of the gang members right there, Extheand, he said while directing his brother's vision. The vexed duffel bag carrying man's back was towards the siblings, and he was very much unaware of the unavoidable meeting that was about to commence. Blueberry. Exthesekan stated, trying to garner the young gangbanger's attention. We need some directions. The Artiphenoid was entirely honest in his comment, as the duo did not quite know all the details surrounding this deal. The fuck, man? The man in blue asked with confusion dominating his face. Don't tell me you two are feds. This day is already bad enough. He concluded while genuinely dejected after closely inspecting the two unannounced arrivals. Before the conversation had a chance to continue, however, the males that were previously occupying the building had now made their exit. While in the process of just that, the bigger male said, We got the call. We need to go now, the big man said with urgency while descending the stairs and not yet fully registering the unanticipated presence. Who the fuck are you two? He then added with yet another layer of aggression introduced after finally spotting the suited-up pair. You got the call, huh? Exthi asked while lighting a cigarette, which took him a considerable amount of time to locate. Where are we going then? He concluded amidst the process of lighting the fag. You are going to be going inside a casket here in a bit, little cracker, the man stated, filled to the brim with belligerence. Now it should be pointed out that neither Exthesekan nor XXV were small specimen by any stretch of the word, as both brothers stood tall at 6'2". However, the gangster responsible for this unrelenting storm of aggression was one of a bigger physique indeed, 6'5", if one had to make a guess. So, this is the last time I will tell you to, get the fuck out of here. His voice was overflowing with threat and impatience. Unsurprisingly, neither one of the brothers' facial expressions changed even remotely after this barrage of threats was finished. They were completely unaffected by the bombardment of ultimatums. You know, XXV. Extheand was now beginning to near the big man while talking to his brother without even looking at him. Since we arrived at this wonderful country, we haven't received a single warm welcome yet. Miccolo Greylove wasn't quite finished yet, but a respite he did take, and I am starting to get pretty fucking sick of it. He finished his sentiment within grappling distance of the big man, and with his own dose of militancy now injected into the exchange. The big male welcomed this development, as he was found smiling at the prospect of violence once he realized exactly where this interchange was heading. Without uttering any more words, he swung at X. This was a fatal mistake. Miccolo dodged the strike, grabbing the aggressor's arm in the process, and using the momentum generated by the hit against him, while utilizing his own feet to bring the big man down onto one knee. Once Extheand had the behemoth in the desired position, he snapped his neck, requiring very little force in all truth. Additionally, this whole dance hardly took any time and had left the recently deceased man's partner in a state of deep angst. In order to mitigate his newly found condition, the male who was accompanying the big man began to pull out his gun from his jacket pocket with haste, however, before he could even brandish the shooting iron. XXV was more than just prepared. The bald marksman had shot the man with a gun in the head with a silenced pistol of his own, while making this interplay look as seamless as his brother did just moments prior. "Hey, man," said the only survivor with the duffel bag still in his grasp and his arms raised ever so slightly above his waist. "I didn't say or do anything." The man concluded as nervousness resonated deep within his tonality. "Well, that's about to change now, isn't it?" Mikolo produced a rhetorical inquest with his vision now fixed on the only survivor. "You are going to tell us where this deal is going down, and you are going to drive us to the exact location." Stans commanded the gangster with little fluctuation present within his voice. The young duffel bag carrying man glanced at both brothers, and then proceeded to respond while garnering a visage of heavy aversion. The adventure continued with the three now on their way to the location of the deal. XXV had taken the car that the two brothers utilized to arrive at the industrial area, while XIV rode passenger in the unlucky gangbanger's car. While the two were sharing the aforementioned vehicle, after a considerable time spent in silence, a conversation had finally initiated. "You got a name, Blueberry?" XI inquired, fully comfortable, with the passenger seat retracted back as far as possible. "Yeah, man, of course." The young gang member answered XICOM's inquiry, which generated quite the level of confusion within the clothed in blue. "It's Bentley Johnson." He finished with his eyes fixated on the road. "BJ."
Zian quickly followed up with another question after a swift smirk.
"Don't start with that shit, man," Bentley stated, exasperated. "I got enough of that bullshit in school." Bitterness had entered Bentley after the occasion of this. Response? "You got a name yourself?" Bentley returned the favour of inquest as annoyance began to attenuate. "Mikolo," Exthekant responded instantly. "Strange name. Never came across it before." Bentley was sincere in his remark. "Yeah, well, that wasn't my choice, you know." XTI answered, leaning back in the seat even more, while still residing in comfort. "Obviously," Bentley said while chuckling to himself. "Your mother gave you the name, right?" BJ did not relent with the inquisition. "No," Mikolo responded instantaneously once again. "She called me the Serpent of Eden." As Mikolo said this, he directed his vision towards Bentley, and shortly after that, Mikolo smirked at the uncertain gangster. Bentley was quite perplexed by this comment, not fully understanding whether it was meant to be a joke or not. Despite, Johnson did eventually produce a response. "Just my fucking luck." He spoke under his breath. "Getting involved with the devil." Bentley Johnson continued to mutter. XVI, I did hear the comments made by the hapless driver, but produced no vocal response of his own, and instead just simply smirked once more. The drive was now over, and in truth, it was a rather short one. The three had traded the industrial scenery for a panorama of rurality, as both of the vehicles were now found parked near a barn on a relatively open field. With the cars inert, XXV and XVI were found communicating over the phone with one another, as they, of course, occupied separate vehicles. Their conversation ended up being unusually brief, however, and after it was done, XD turned to his new friend and began to communicate. "I am going to go in," Mikolo said while in the process of getting ready to leave the vehicle. "You wait in the car, and you better not try anything. My brother will be watching you, BJ." Extakan spoke in a solemn and cautionary tone, despite referring to the man by his crude school moniker. "Look, man, Bentley's turn it was to speak now, and he did so with newly discovered confidence. "I am sure you are a crazy motherfucker. This much is clear." Bentley was speaking sincerely. "But there are some serious niggers up in that motherfucker, with some serious firepower. I don't know what the fuck is going on here, but XV. I was finished listening to Bentley's caveat. "Stay in the car, Blueberry." Xtheine opted to repeat himself right before exiting the vehicle while paying no heed to the gangster's warning. Mikolo made his way towards and into the barn where the deal was supposed to be taking place. A short interval of time had elapsed since Xtheine's departure, and Bentley found himself in a rather precarious position. You see, Mr. Johnson was not a killer by nature, and was, in fact, much too smart to be involved in such low-level gang-related operations that he found himself encompassed in. Major tragedy had devastated the young Johnson's world when he and his younger brother had suddenly found themselves motherless at rather young ages, while their father was locked up. Spending time inside of a penitentiary, such an unexpected and ruinous development had forced then 16-year-old Bentley's hand as he desperately sought for a way to provide for and take care of his sibling. One of the paths available to the youngling was in fact the gang, and in the end it was one that Bentley had elected to take. Once initiated and fully a member, the bereaved Johnson was never quite permitted to leave the organisation. Mr. Johnson's talent, as it related to this line of work, was house invasion, and he was quite skilled at it, in fact. However, on this specific day, 4 years after initially joining the gang, Bentley's task was overseeing a drug trade, and he was not quite prepared for any more murder. While inside the car, Johnson muttered to himself, "How the fuck did I get involved in this bullshit, man?" He thought to himself while vocalizing it out loud. "All right, I can't believe I am about to do this," he continued, conflicted. "I am going to go into that bitch and try to save that crazy motherfucker's life." With this new plan formulated, Mr. Johnson proceeded to set it in motion. Bentley exited the vehicle, ignoring Xtheine's instructions altogether, and progressed inside the barn. Himself, in hopes of alleviating the situation and possibly even explaining it all away. XXV, while obviously being fully aware of Mr. Johnson's movements, did not stop Bentley from carrying out his aspiration, and instead chose to follow him. Bentley Johnson did not quite expect to see the picture that was painted in front of him once the young man had made his entrance into the barn. The barn contained 5 men in totality, including the new arrival, X2. However, only the one remained standing upright. Could one guess who the last man standing was, perhaps? It was, in fact, X. He stood there, amidst the fallen, scanning the area until he located the last survivor as the rest of the gangbangers around were no longer breathing. "Please no, man." The only remaining living soul plead to Xtheine's in hopes of appealing to the sadist. This was not to be, unfortunately. Without uttering a single word, Mikolo approached the man and stomped the survivor's leg with quite the crippling force, breaking it at the ankle. The man screamed at the top of his lungs, but Xtheine was not quite finished. The Artifinoid repeated the act, only this time shattering the man's leg at the knee. Needless to say, the gangster's reaction remained unchanged as he continued to shriek. Mikolo circled his prey like an animal, while cries of anguish reverberated throughout the barn. The cruel creation eventually repositioned himself nearest the man's head, after which he progressed to break the man's fingers. 123, 400, and fix 780 Ken, XVI, I broke all 10 digits, one by one, with a smile of grand fulfillment ushering this session along. Bentley Johnson had enough of the savage display eventuating in front of him. The distressed gangster quickly turned around and began to dash out of the barn. This effort, however, would be subdued rather quickly as Bentley Johnson found none other than XXV standing in front of him, precluding the young man's audacious escape. "I think it would be best if you remained here, Mr. Johnson," stated XXV in his typical monotone voice. Fear was now beginning to control the gangbanger as he realized that his book of life might be nearing its conclusion, with the final chapter being one filled with quite the unequalled amount of suffering. As screams of the man, who Exthine was still playing around with, dominated the barn, Johnson did not quite know what to do. "What the fuck is going on, man?" Bentley shouted with his voice faltering from fear. "I didn't do shit to you two." "What the fuck?" he continued while losing stability quickly. XXV noticed this immediately. "You should try your best to calm down, Mr. Johnson," Anders said with cries of pain still in the background. "My brother will get bored soon enough." XXV concluded his sentiment. Surely enough, much like all things, the screams had come to an end. Xclayans had put the man out of his misery by breaking one final bone, the cervical one. Well, that was fun, Mikolo stated while once again looking for a cigarette and visibly delighted. "It's the little things in life, right, Blueberry?" the pleased killer inquired of Johnson while chuckling. "Hey, man," said Bentley, subjugated and governed entirely by dread. "Before you two kill me, could I at least haul my little brother one last time?" Johnson was sincere in his statement as complete hopelessness sprouted her roots within the alarmed gangster's heart. Furthermore, he addressed his inquiry to XXXV directly, as he deemed him the more reasonable out of the two brothers. This, of course, was very much the case. After hearing Bentley's remark, however, something unexpected had occurred. Exthianth had suddenly begun to laugh uncontrollably. This fit went on for quite some time, mind you, and whilst it was occurring, Bentley glanced over at XXV with a look of insurmountable perplexity. XXV's facial expression, however, remained robotic while he returned the favour and gazed back at the wildered youth. Finally, after a considerable interval of time had passed, I was free of the spell of domineering laughter. "I like you, Blueberry," Mikolo stated, reaching for the duffel bag, which he did bring along with him, of course, to keep the illusion of the deal up. Once the bag was no longer occupying the ground and was now firmly in Exthion's embrace, the artiphenoid threw it to the hesitant outlaw. He launched it, with such power, in fact, that young Bentley was forced to take a couple of steps back once he caught the duffel bag. "What is this? What do I do with this?" Bentley inquired with confusion, now layering the already existing fear amongst many other emotions that had been cultivated by the current situation. "Do I look like your fucking financial advisor here?" Exi responded with a question of his own and an inkling of antagonism for good measure. "Blow it on hookers, gamble it away, or burn it for all I care." He finished his answer while searching for another cigarette and no longer belligerent. "There is 250 kelvins in here." Perplexity was not willing to release Bentley from her grasp. "You are just giving it to me? All of it? Are you high?" Johnson burst out a succession of questions. "Yeah," Exthine answered instantly as he lit the fag. "Liquor, cocaine, methamphetamine, amphetamine, a couple of pots of coffee, and a shit ton of smokes. Yeah, I am a little high. Yeah," Mikolo added in an instructive manner with barely any oscillation within his voice. "What the fuck is going on?" Bentley asked, with major reprieves in between every single word. "What my brother is saying, Mr. Johnson?" XXV had now entered the conversation with hopes of injecting some much-needed lucidity, "is that you work for us now, and inside that duffel bag could be found your first payment." payment for bringing us here, to be more precise. I hope this alleviates any confusion, Mr. Johnson," XXV stated while matching the instructive tone of his brother from just moments prior. Unfortunately, the state of bewilderment that Mr. Johnson presided under did not lessen as much as the young man would desire. He was left with no choice but to continue his inquisition. "What the fuck, man?" he asked again. Ixthayan was now beginning to get aggravated, only slightly, however. "You still don't understand, huh? What do you want me to do? You want me to make fucking a rap song explaining the shit?" Mikolo was mocking the gangbanger while visibly frustrated at the lack of comprehension that was taking place inside the barn. "You work for us now, and your payment for your first job is inside that bag. I do not know how to word this any other way," Ixthayan said while speaking slowly to the blue-covered youngster. "Now, my brother already has your info. We will contact you when we need you. Do you understand that, Blueberry?" The Artiphenoid's tone was still wrapped in mockery. "Or do we need to make a fucking PowerPoint presentation over here?" Mockery was now attenuating, and Sally was now supplanting it. First, Bentley needed some time to himself. "I understand," he concluded, with too many emotions running through the man's mind to mention at this point. "Good." Ixthayan was now back to his usual speaking voice. "My brother and I still got some things to take care of here. You may go now," XXV stated as he turned around to survey the situation inside the barn once again. Bentley chose the silent route as he turned his body towards the exit. Once that occurred, XXV stepped away from the egress, removing himself from the role of the barrier he was acting as previously. Bentley progressed to finally make his exit. "Until next time, Mr. Johnson," XXV articulated in a professional tone. Bentley once again remained silent, but did nod at XXV to acknowledge the previously mentioned remark. Once outside, Mr. Johnson found himself at quite the crossroads. Still not fully understanding what exactly went on inside that barn, he only knew one thing for certain. The two men whom he had just recently met were most assuredly not with the authorities. Well, that and the fact that Mr. Bentley had just become $250,000 richer. This was quite an unprecedented development for the uncertain man, considering he had never made that much money before whilst involved in this criminal atmosphere. This was perhaps the final factor that had helped the young male to make his ultimate decision. With the new partnership established, Bentley knew that his former employers will unquestionably be looking for him. He rushed home on that same day, grabbed his little brother, and all else that was needed and went into hiding, relocating altogether while utilizing the newly found wealth he had recently acquired. Bentley had officially made a deal with the devil. Later on that night, the two brothers had made their return to their new and wonderful home, as no more business was in need of being addressed. The pair had brought along all of the product gathered at the farm. This was quite the success, considering it was their first venture into this endeavour. First, but hardly the last, as preparation for more missions began almost instantly after they both had arrived at the luxurious mansion. As days, weeks, and even months passed, Bentley himself would provide much of the information needed so that the duo of brothers could resume to devour the streets, while eliminating any and all who stood opposing them. Much success had followed suit, and much of that success reciprocated onto BJ himself. Given some time, Bentley found himself more than just content with his current arrangement, as he was able to take care of his younger brother like never before, and this was quite welcomed. Bentley Johnson had officially become a part of the Greylove family.